Dinosaur Man.
Hello and welcome to the Dinosaur Man Podcast. This time, 4 hours long in a special cut. I am Andy Hughes and I'm here with my granny goodness, Alex Hudson.
We legitimately don't have the bandwidth for a 4-hour cut of this podcast.
And bringing him back, like the Martian Manhunter he is, Anthony McCormack.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
I had no idea what character I was going to go with before I said it.
I
don't know if anyone can tell that.
I felt that. I felt it deep in my soul.
Also, can I just say now, the spoiler klaxon hasn't been sounded yet, but
Fine.
It'll be in the title, don't worry. Well, no, I'm not going to go and recut that now, so
Quick,
it's fine.
like the Flash, I will return back time.
Spoiler alert.
and our Martian Manhunter, Anthony McCormack. Oh no!
I mean, I thought you might have done Superman, but that's still technically a spoiler.
Hang on, Andy. Were you too soon? Were you too soon?
Anthony, I am the key. Welcome to the episode, everyone, where we get to talk the Snyder Cut. So this is the third time me and you, Alex, have talked about this. Well, obviously we've talked about it many times afterwards, but this is the third time we're going to have had a recording of it. As we said, this is a spoiler review, so hit that spoiler klaxon now.
Wah, wah, wah.
The Waluigi Duck spoiler klaxon.
I think it's still a porg.
It's kind of a mix of them all, really, isn't it?
So yeah, from here on out, and also at the start of the episode, spoilers. Good job I led off with like the biggest spoiler.
Yeah.
The one they really were trying to hide. But yeah, we're going to...
I mean, if it looked like that, I would try and hide it as well.
But it's Warner Brothers, though. Like, they love putting spoilers out in all of their promotional stuff anyway. So you're cool. You're cool. Don't worry about it.
This is true.
So yeah, we're going to talk Snyder Cut. We're going to talk...
give it its true name. Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Snyder Cut. It's easier.
Whoa.
Hashtag Snyder Cut, baby.
Hashtag release Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Restore the Snyderverse and all that. So, we reviewed this on last week's episode, and Alex took us on a kind of journey of how we got to the point of getting the Snyder Cut released, or Zack Snyder's Justice League, whatever you want to call it. But basically, we went on the journey of how we got there. So if you want to know kind of how this film came about, go back and listen to that kind of little... It was a mini timeline of about how we got from Joss Whedon's original Justice League in 2017 to having a new version of the same film in 2021. Now, we actually went on the live stream with Ant last Sunday, which is still up on Talk Review. They haven't took it down. They haven't cancelled us yet. It's a 3-hour-long stream, but in that, me and Alex talk with Nick and Ant from Talk Review a lot about the characters and kind of what we thought about the characters and how the film kind of comes off. So we're kind of going to avoid a lot of that in this. If you want to know kind of those kind of things, go and watch the stream. It's YouTube Talk and Review. Talk, the letter N, Review.
Yeah, like I said, down with the kids. Talk and
Review. But, we had a really good conversation there, and I really recommend going and checking that out. But we're going to talk even more. Like, by the end of this, we will definitely have talked for longer than the film is on, and that almost seems like an impossibility to begin with because this film goes on forever. But we're going to do it. So, to begin with, let's set our stall out early. Me and Alex spoke last week about our views on this version of Justice League and kind of where we stand, and it wasn't the most positive review. We weren't very glowing. And please explain to the listeners what you thought. Like, just an overview of kind of like, how did you feel about the whole experience?
Of watching the film or leading up to it?
Do both if you want,
cool.
Because I think for us, it's been very clear of kind of where we stood going into it and where we are coming out. So it'd be nice to kind of get a little idea of you.
So let's rewind to 2016, pre-2017, just Justice League. I think we're comfortable with that name now, are we? Comfortable. I was very, very hyped to know that within a year's time I'm going to get a Justice League movie. Massive fan of the Justice League. And I think upon initial viewing of the Justice League, I was just happy at the fact that we've got it. So kind of like the little child or the little fan in me kind of like took over initially, and then you watch it again and again and you realise that actually this is just not a really good movie. So yeah, really, really disappointed by it. And then literally almost immediately afterwards, you start hearing the whole rumours around, there's this 4-hour cut that Zack Snyder's done and it's ready, and they just butchered it and hacked it, and it, it started to get that cult following, which I wasn't an active member of, let's say, but I followed it just because the thought intrigued me. I would love to have seen the movie. If this is the movie that wasn't supposed to be, I would love to see the movie that was supposed to be. So yeah, I've been very, very, and I'd never had any hope of it actually being a thing. I thought it would be, initially I kind of thought it would be kind of like Warner Brothers just kind of admitting to defeat, almost, which I thought would never happen. Turns out I was wrong, I guess. I don't know whether they're admitting to defeat or they're just kind of going, I just kind of want more money, which probably makes more sense. So the thought of it coming out and then hearing that it's going to be 4 hours, I was pretty hyped. I'm not going to lie. 4 hours of a Justice League movie, regardless of whether or not it, before I watched it, is good or hopefully it's good. It's hopefully better. Excited me. 4 hours of any movie is an intriguing concept, regardless of whether or not you're a fan of the material of what it actually is. And then I watched it, and I wholeheartedly think that it's better than what came out in 2017. There's definitely failings within watching it, and I am a fan of, I would classify myself as a fanboy of this type of movie, of DC, of all the characters in it. So I'm going to have kind of like a bias there, so I'm always going to kind of try to see the good in it, but I can appreciate the fact that there are things in the 2017 version that are somewhat better than the 2021 version, but on the whole I thought the 2021 version was a massive upgrade to the 2017 version. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it, if I'm being honest, as that kind of... I start to think, maybe on my initial reaction, I'm like, yes, I love it. And then maybe I'll watch it again. Maybe not anytime soon, because, it's half a shift at work, 4 hours, isn't it? So, I'll watch it again in maybe years to come, and I might kind of nitpick a little bit more at it. But at the minute, I am firmly in the camp of I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed all the additional content and all the extra stuff that we got, that was a lot more story and character driven, that the original was absolutely lacking in. So that's where I am in terms of this.
Super. So anyone who wondered why we brought Ant along, he is here to try his hardest to balance us out.
Yeah, one word: balance. That's what he's here for.
The weight is firmly on your shoulders.
Thank you.
But I think it's important that we do try and sort of level the playing field somewhat. And we've said our piece on the episode last week, and we've then also said it on the live stream with Nick and Anne. So in terms of our opinions, we don't need to really retread those in general. We can get into sort of the nitty-gritty of what we're here to talk about today. So,
yes.
Full spoiler review. So we will be going into it in relative. But yeah, Andy, if you want to kick us off.
So yeah, like we said last week, we couldn't really talk about some stuff because they were spoilers, and we didn't want to, if you're committing to watching a 4-hour movie, I suppose you should probably enjoy it as you watch it rather than let us ruin that for you. So, fortunately for us, like I said, we did a lot of talking on the talk review thing, but today we're going to talk about kind of the changes that were made and how that affects it and what we think. Now, fortunately for us, IGN have put out a article that is basically just every change that has happened between the Snyder version of the film and the Joss Whedon version of the film, which means we could talk about each bit. Some of them I don't even understand what they mean, but that's the great thing about content. Now, the interesting thing is, it is in such a weird order. And you'll see what I mean, because you might think, oh, maybe they went through chronologically and went, oh, we'll look at these things. Or maybe it's just, stuff that they thought was most important. But that kind of loses the fact after, the third one. So let's start with Jared Leto returns as the Joker.
Very important.
The first on the list.
It must be done in terms of importance then, or paycheck.
So yeah,
I wonder
Jared
how
Leto,
much he got paid. I bet
You
it
know
was
what?
a ridiculous
I
amount.
have a sneaking suspicion that he did it for free, just to
absolutely.
fuel the Ayer cut discussion.
He's been in that makeup ever since.
And so he should be.
Yeah, it's weird. He cropped up in Blade Runner 2049 afterwards, and I was like, the hell is he doing here?
So yeah, Jared Leto wasn't in the original cut. He wasn't even supposed to be in the original Snyder version, but he was brought in. Basically, Snyder decided he wanted a scene that had Ben Affleck going against Leto's Joker. I suppose at this point, let's just talk the entire of the nightmare scene, because that's kind of where this next bit goes to anyway. So the idea that this whole thing leads into it goes back to Batman vs Superman, if I'm right, and this kind of vision that Bruce Wayne has. And in this, you see them kind of in a distant future where Superman is a bad guy now, and Jared Leto's giving Batman a reach around or something. And
Yes.
I think you should start here, because I think you actually made a couple of really interesting points last week about this and your feelings towards it. And I'll echo them if they aren't brought up, but please tell me. What do you make as Leto's biggest fan?
It was an interesting one for me because this is when it was discussed that there was going to be additional content made and that Snyder wanted to bring in the Joker. It's always going to, prick my ears up, especially considering the fact that he's using Leto, because I am one of the vast minority out there that actually enjoyed his version of the Joker. So yeah, I was kind of like, okay, let's see where this goes and let's see how they does it. I think they've kind of they in terms of leading up to it, they hit hard on this whole Joker thing. For the screen time that he actually gets in it, they hit hard on it, and it's because we mentioned it last week. The Joker sells, regardless of who it is, where he is, what he's doing, or how he's doing it. He will sell. But in terms of the actual nightmare sequence itself, I found it a bit of a conundrum because it was entirely new material. So, like you said, it wasn't part of the original version. There was probably a sequence that included a nightmare in the original version, but not this version that we got. But what perplexed me more than anything is the fact that because it was all entirely new, and Zack Snyder has openly said, I wanted to get this content in because I know that I won't get a chance to get it in anywhere else because this is kind of like the last hurrah. It openly leaves it on a cliffhanger, which as a fan or as a not even a fan, as a watcher, you would expect, oh, something's going to come from this. But a director knowing nothing's going to come from it, but then openly leaving you wanting more, you start to question whether or not it's actually necessary for that sequence to have been either reshot or done at all, really. So it left me a little bit perplexed when I watched it, because I just started to question the necessity for it. Because when you stop and think about what's discussed and how it's discussed and where it could potentially lead, you kind of go, okay, that could go somewhere. But then it's kind of, you go, well, it's not going to go anywhere. So what is the point? But in terms of what happened in it, as a little fanboy, got me excited. It's not the most cleverly written, and it's very, to the point, and very, you can tell that it was quickly put together, as opposed to everything else that's had, a full production done and years to write a script, presumably. You can tell it was put together quite quickly because it's very childish humor. It doesn't feel very well thought out, but the back and forth between Batman and Joker, which is obviously what that whole sequence is about, gets me excited as a Batman and Joker fan, especially because I really, really like Ben Affleck as Batman. I think he's a really interesting older Batman. And as I said, I really like Leto's Joker. So the prospect of them coming together and seeing how they react, what chemistry they have and where that could potentially lead gets me excited. I think for the brief moment that they were together, I think the conversation worked well, but it's because it's a conversation that I'm quite invested in with the death of Robin, and it's always something you kind of really want to see on screen because that is kind of like a pivotal moment for both the Joker and Batman. So the fact that they talk about it and that's pretty much they're just enticing each other, trying to get one over on each other, and you kind of see them both get one over on each other. It's an interesting kind of like concept, and I quite enjoyed the set piece between them. But in terms of whether or not the whole thing was necessary, I think I can firmly say it wasn't.
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, completely unnecessary scene, but I understand why it's there. It is, I mean, with all this talk of, oh, well, you know, Snyder knows he's not going to get a second bite at the cherry again. It is sequel bait and nothing else. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely there to get the audience tweeting, restore the Snyderverse. And I can understand that from a filmmaker's point of view, because the one thing I won't say about Zack Snyder is that he doesn't have passion for this franchise or for these characters. He clearly does have passion for it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have demanded to do a Justice League movie and then spent 4 years hoping that, you know, the movement would be enough and helping to fuel that by releasing tidbits and things like that. So ultimately, I can understand why he's doing it, because he's saying, hey, these are the characters that I kind of want to set up for the next installments in this trilogy of Justice League movies. Here's a little taster of what you might get. And for a certain demographic, and Ant falls well within that camp, it's going to absolutely work. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I can appreciate that this film is not made for me. This is not a film that has been designed to. You
mean this is an art house Justice League?
I think my issue always comes back to the fact that we never had enough time to get invested in any of the characters within this universe before they jumped into a Justice League film. I mean, Batman vs. Superman is essentially 3 parts of a Justice League film. You know, you've got Wonder Woman in there as well as Superman and Batman. So this scene particularly just felt like, oh, okay, well, I can understand why you're putting this in there, because it is for you to basically put in there as the last thing that these audience members are going to see and say, huh, how about that? You know, these are my ideas. And, you know, from that perspective, fine. It doesn't add anything to the film. It feels amateurish and slapdash in terms of the way it's put together. And it was clearly made in a rush because they had to finish the effects for it. So it had to be done with it, you know, by the end of the week or whatever. And then they started filming it. So with things like that, I'm always of the opinion that it feels like an afterthought. And that's what it feels like. It feels like an afterthought that is only here for one reason, and it's to get buzz. And we saw that in the marketing campaign. All of his lines within the marketing campaign were cut from the thing. And I know we've been promised that in the Justice is Grey version, there's going to be a different alternate scene with the Joker in it. Fine. Yeah, so Zack Snyder's confirmed that the Justice is Grey cut, which is coming out in a few months' time, features an alternate Joker scene instead of this one.
Okay.
I'm presuming it's going to still be a nightmare scene, but it will be a different scene, apparently.
Oh, it will give you nightmares.
Is it going to be more along the lines of the promotional stuff that came out that was all in black and white?
Where he's wearing a crown of thorns. Yeah, and he wears a t-shirt that says, I am Jesus, and also my name is Joker.
Guys, do you get the metaphor?
Yeah, so that's where I stand with it.
Yeah, I understand. And yeah, I kind of see both sides where I go, okay, I think this is the worst written film, the that was probably a Freudian slip when I say worst written film, but I think it's the worst written scene in the entire film. I think it's one of the worst performed, and it reminded me that Mira has a British accent in this film for some reason, and I still don't understand why. But I also get it for you, and it's completely, it's like these are characters that you want to see interacting. I'm sorry, this is the way you had to see them interact, but they did. But it is absolute sequel bait. It's absolute kind of, let's get we've got this done, let's get them talking again. Just a quick kind of real brief question, like, would you want to see more of this? I think I know where you stand, Alex, but
I'll stay silent.
But for you, Ant, is that where this looks like it's going?
Yeah.
Is that what you want?
It's an interesting one though, because I will always say that I want more of this type of stuff. Like DC has been, unfortunately, very lacking in terms of quality. It has now and again some hidden gems like Wonder Woman 1 and Shazam, but for the vast majority, it's been lacking in terms of content. And when you then start to then build on a story it goes beyond maybe 1 or 2 movies that potentially could turn into a saga. Kind of like you always have. I suppose it's impossible to not compare or echo it against Marvel with the entire Infinity War saga. But if they've got something along the lines of a longer story that's going to be spread over multiple movies that allows you to get more invested and jump into certain aspects of different characters or explore new characters, new threats, new villains, things that your average viewer hasn't been witness to, as opposed to those that have read the comics and have seen the animated versions and know more about it and can go, well, actually, there's a lot of really good stuff there, and if we get it in even a half decent format, of course I want to see that on a big screen, or of course I want to see that in a movie.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like, it was just just from being kind of like a fan, you always want that to be successful if it's something that you enjoy and something that you've seen and you think it could meet some of your requirements as a fan. Then I would want to see it.
I guess it's a dumb question. Of course you want to.
I mean, Darkseid,
a couple of things
Darkseid itself, like he was in this. I mean, he wasn't in the original, but he was in this enough for you to kind of go, yeah, he looks kind of badass. And I really kind of want to see where that goes. I want to see someone fight him.
A couple of things that we know would have been included is Darkseid basically taking the fight to Earth, the anti-life equation being based on Earth and going to get that, using that to turn Superman evil because, of course, Snyder's always wanted it. It's basically his wet dream. But also Clark and Lois having a baby, that baby growing up, taking over the mantle of Batman was going to be involved in it. There's potentially going to be stuff like the New Gods.
I also heard about the baby aspect that I've heard 2 things. So one was that it was Clark and Lois's baby, and then it would turn up, it would have powers, but then also end up being Batman. But I also heard that the baby's actually Bruce's.
Yes, apparently originally there was supposed to be a plot where when Superman is gone, Bruce gets close to Lois, and they kind of fall for each other, and then she has his baby. But apparently the studio vetoed this, which means technically not your original vision, Zack. I keep going to call him Jack Snyder. But then there's also the talk of, could it still be Bruce's, and that's the reason why Superman's so angry. There's a lot of stuff that's already been kind of leaked about by Snyder himself about where it would go.
I think he's openly kind of said, this is what my 2 and 3 would look like.
Yeah, and while he's basically saying, we are not going to do this definitely, the voices are just as loud. All the people who were previously getting this one made, they are still there. Next heading in this IGN article, and this is what I mean when I say very interesting, Deathstroke differences. Like their third, if we go by order of importance, their third most important is the fact that Deathstroke has a. So I suppose the interesting thing about Deathstroke is he appears at the end of the original cut, and it looks like he's setting up kind of a Legion of Doom in Justice League thing. But in this one, it's definitely setting up more of the solo movie that Ben Affleck would have done as Batman. Which version, which direction, does that make any difference to you, or do we not care about this?
We don't care about this. And I think the reason that we don't care about this is because we know for sure. I mean, if you had any doubt that there might be a Justice League 2 or a Justice League 3, you could forgive the nightmare scene for being, like you said, sequel bait. But we know 100% for sure that Ben Affleck is not going to release a solo Batman movie now, because the Batman has been taken over by Matt Reeves and it's finished filming. So we're not going to get another solo The Batman movie. It serves the change in that scene serves zero purpose, in my opinion. There still could be room for a Legion of Doom movie. So making that change from there could be a Legion of Doom movie to something that we know isn't going to happen makes no sense. But regardless, I hated both of those scenes. Like in the original, I hated it. Like the whole kind of it was a post-credit scene in the original, wasn't it? And it was like it felt so cheesy, so forced, and so corny that I just didn't like it. And it was just a case of they just wanted to get that in there to set something up. Which fair enough, if that's what you're going for, you have to get something in. But then when it was discussed that there was going to be more content for this one, and there was a lot of discussion around you would actually see Deathstroke break Lex Luthor out of prison, and that's what I was expecting. I was expecting to see a bit of Deathstroke be Deathstroke rather than just the same thing.
Hey, no,
just longer.
He's going to just stand around.
Yeah. So when he just turned up on the boat, I was like, oh, okay, so are we just going to get the same thing again?
And then in the future, he's there in the future as well, so it's fine. I suppose, like you said, if you ever thought there was going to be a solo Ben Affleck Batman movie, watch him in those scenes at the end when he's talking to Martian Manhunter, and you realise Ben Affleck don't want to be here. I suppose, little note for the audience at home, the interesting thing would be the fact that that the Deathstroke movie, like Batman movie, would have evolved around Deathstroke apparently breaking Batman both as Batman and Bruce Wayne. Now he knows his identity and attacking him on both fronts. Could have been interesting. I suppose let's move on because there's not much to say there. There's something that you brought up already, Ant, which is the next one, which is the fact that the one thing we get a lot more in this than in the old version is we see Darkseid. Like, we actually see him. And we see him basically tear through the Justice League. And I suppose, like, looking back, it's pretty cool to see him, defeating these Justice League members in this kind of, like, visions that Cyborg has. Let's go to you first, Alex, and like, Darkseid for you, as somebody who knows nothing really about this kind of universal character, does it do anything for you? Like, or was it just a case of we're stamping the same card of tired old villains?
Look, I've seen enough superhero movies to know that there's usually an alien who's up to no good. And, you know, for me, Darkseid, in terms of what his ultimate goal seems to be, and sort of the way in which he's just a big hulking brute, I don't know, it seems one for one with Thanos as far as, you know, I'm concerned. And I appreciate I'm speaking as a layman here. I'm not speaking as anyone who has any knowledge of the afterlife equation or whatever it was. But in terms of, you know, obviously BVS had sort of set him up as being, you know, this thing that would be coming at some point. And then, yeah, I mean, his appearance in this is fine. I guess it's the sort of extended history lesson at the beginning where you see the most of him, isn't it? And that kind of served as, I mean, I hated that scene, but...
Which bit's this, sorry?
The extended history lesson.
The one
the
where
flashback.
where Wonder Woman is giving a very
yeah.
overzealous speech on.
So, when you say at the beginning, I'm pretty sure that's like over an hour into the film.
Well over an hour, and yeah.
But that's the first time you see him.
Yeah.
And it's the most you see him.
And it's the most engaged Gal Gadot has ever sounded.
So, the thing that I've got with that is that, you know, I watched it and I went, okay, yeah, I get it. He's a powerful alien. and he's able to kill a lot of people with a big weapon. And I kind of went, okay, I think I know everything I need to know about this guy certainly in terms of where the actual story took him in this one. I appreciate, hey, if there was a 2 and a 3, things would be different. Yeah, okay, I get it. If there was a 2 and a 3, things would be different. Hey, there might still be a 2 and a 3, and I pray every day that there is, just for Ant.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, for me, he's sort of this, a relatively interchangeable villain, in the same way that, I mean, Steppenwolf to me is absolutely one of those villains where you understand that they have a motivation, but it's not really. I mean, it felt like it was covered in maybe 30 seconds more detail than it was in the Whedon version, and that was it.
But what about the stuff like, so for example, Steppenwolf gets more of a story here. Like he gets more of a backstory. We know that. I think they try and kind of give him some kind of drive in sense of, he is somebody who has failed Darkseid previously, and he has now got this kind of penance that he has to pay of like 5,000 planets have to be given to Darkseid, and he just wants to get back by his side. Like, does that play for you?
Yeah, I mean, they go into some more specifics of what he needs to do to get back in his good books, but in the Whedon version, it is said that he has failed Darkseid previously. That's fine. That's all I need to know, that he's a fuck-up, basically. But even in this, I don't feel like I have any degree of understanding of what exactly he's fucked up. So I kind of just came away from it going, he's fine. I don't feel like I have any more of a motivation for him, and I really don't feel like I have any degree of understanding of what the limits of his powers are, or whether he's the one who's got power, or whether it's Darkseid who has power, or whether the power's only in the Tesseract or Mother Box or whatever it's called. So
yeah, they're just big guys who can punch hard.
For me, it felt like a lot of the Marvel stuff of, hey, it's a villain from outer space who is tangentially related to the place this is happening, or to the characters this is happening to, and they'll fuck it up for a bit, and then they'll get defeated at the end of the film, and it'll all be fine. And I appreciate you've got a big bad over, an overarching one, but other than that, certainly Steppenwolf just felt like, oh, it's the same as in the first one, except now there's a bit more of him, and he looks less, crumpled.
And as one of life's fuck-ups, did you find yourself finding any kind of connection with these villains?
Well, absolutely. I am connected to him on a spiritual level, if I'm being honest.
But yeah, do you have anything, like, what are your feelings on the villains as somebody who really liked this?
I think they tried to make Steppenwolf more relatable by kind of placing him in a position of, I think that Darkseid turns around and says to him at one point, something about family. So we get the feeling that rather than just saying that you could argue that they're actually even potentially related, or that they see their kind of whatever they are, their unit, their division, their military, whatever, as kind of like family. So I feel like they try to make it relatable and potentially almost humanize him to make the audience potentially relate with the situation that he is in, rather than kind of who or what he is, right? Being an alien and failing your overlord alien master. I don't think anyone could relate to that, but
no,
it gives us an understanding of, like Alex said. I do agree. You could cover Steppenwolf's backstory with, he's failed Darkseid and he needs to get in his good graces, which Whedon's version did. This just went into a little bit more. And you could argue for a villain that was always going to end up dying at the end of it. Do you really need more? But
true.
At the same token, I quite liked the additional stuff we got, because he just, from his aesthetic more than anything, he looks pretty awesome in comparison to the really big Dobby that we got, which I really, really didn't enjoy. And yeah, he seemed a little bit more menacing in this one than he did in the last one. But yeah, I just, there wasn't that much difference. If you really look at it, there wasn't that much difference, but I did enjoy the difference that we got.
And I think one of the positives I'm seeing like online when you look at what people are saying, a lot of people are saying they are enjoying the fact that there is more story to Steppenwolf, and I suppose given time, you're going to have that. People are liking the design, which is great. Like, I like seeing, like I say, I like these visions that Cyborg had of the future, where you see, you know, Diana burning in a pyre, you see him basically murder Aquaman and using his kind of Omega beams, which is a really cool kind of, as a comic book fan, going, okay, that's really cool to see. I genuinely don't believe that would have been in the film originally. I think, for me, that's definitely Snyder going, well, this is my one film, let's throw it all at the wall, like, because with a lot of the CGI in this film, I think a lot of it is dodgy. Yeah. And it is because it wasn't completed, and, you know, even with that 70 million, with everything else he's adding and removing, it is what it is. But yeah, I think, you know, there is stuff to take away of that. Like, it's cool to see him, and he looks great. Like, as a villain, he looks like Darkseid.
He does look really good.
I think Steppenwolf still looks, but it is what it is.
I will agree. I do like the aesthetic of Darkseid. I feel like they've stayed as true to kind of like comic book and previous iterations of him as possible, and they've not tried to change him too much. I really quite liked the organic Omega sign in his chest. That was a nice touch, I think. But yeah, I think just touching on what Alex said, I'm sorry, I know you're going to change the bit that we're talking about.
That's okay,
just touching on what Alex said about the whole, it feels kind of like Thanos-esque. There is this whole comparison you get with a lot of these characters, and it almost makes it impossible not, and this is what I said earlier, right? It almost makes it impossible not to compare DC property with Marvel property and vice versa. I think the tendency is to compare DC to Marvel more critically, because Marvel seem to get it right 9 times out of 10. But there is always, like, you look at certain characters, Quicksilver, The Flash, like just that, Thanos, Darkseid. There's always going to be those comparisons. Batman, Iron Man, it's always there. There's always something there, and it's because of when these characters were being created, inspiration was being taken from both sides. It's just that modern day movie versions of them, Marvel got it right, and DC just seems to be slacking.
I think just to sort of finalise that point, the issue I've got with it is, with things like Batman, I'm fine with that, because I can, as a sort of layman, I can identify them as different properties to Iron Man, or Superman as a different property to, I don't know, Captain Marvel, I guess. Whereas with Darkseid, because I think if you move outside of the comic sphere, he is a pretty much unknown quantity to a lot of the audience. Because we've seen Thanos so recently, that's where the issue, I think, comes in, is that you're essentially trying to do something that your opponents, and I know it's not technically opponents or whatever, everyone's in this together, but, you know, your main competitor in terms of the movie making, they've been setting this up for the last however long, and 2 years after this film came out, we then saw Thanos actually arriving in the films. So it kind of feels like they've already been setting this up, and you're kind of going for a guy who's basically got a very similar skill set, and you wonder whether, if Infinity War and Endgame had come out in 2018, wasn't it?
2018.
So 1 year after, 6 months after this film came out. So whether, if those films had come out in 2018, 2019, and then we'd had a second Justice League where Darkseid is the main villain, whether there'd just be people who are completely new to the franchise still just going, I don't get who this is other than just Thanos again, but a different colour. And I think that's purely coming from an ignorant point of view, and I'll cop to it.
It's not coming from an ignorant point of view. It's coming from a very well placed kind of like movie fan point of view, because it's this is where DC have always fell short on Marvel, because Marvel got it right so quick. And I would say so quick, yes, they fell over with, you know, the Incredible Hulk, but as soon as Iron Man hit, they seemed to knocked together a formula which they kind of like used for nearly every single movie after it, and it worked very, very well. DC then tried to put stuff out, and it's always going to be compared, and because it's always subpar in comparison, it will always be, you are trying to be Marvel, you are trying to be this, and that's not coming from an ignorant standpoint, it's coming from an observer.
Well, I'll touch on that at the end in our sort of summary, because I've got a couple of thoughts that I'll bring up then. But if we move on, Andy, I don't know.
If it helps, Thanos is purple, Darkseid is
grey.
If it also helps, Darkseid would destroy Thanos. Just saying.
It's a conversation for another time. Does anybody want to talk about the aspect ratio difference?
Not particularly.
No.
One is square and one is not. Who wants to talk about the music? So this had a completely new score for it, done by Thomas Holkenborg, aka Junkie XL. Basically, they threw out who was it before? Danny Elfman
came in for
yeah. They got rid of him and they went Junkie XL, write us a whole new 4-hour score. And he did it
as well,
and it exists. Some people absolutely adore this score, and I think the score could be nice if I got to hear it one at a time. I think the point when I'm hearing it all of the time for all of the characters, it becomes very noticeable. So we touched on this a little bit last week when we talked about. So we were talking about Judas and the Black Messiah, and being like, that has a beautiful score that you don't notice is there. In comparison to this, which has a score that could be nice, but I'm always aware of it.
It's the same problem that Joker had. Joker had a score that it was a great score. Unfortunately, certainly for me and Andy, we both felt that it was overpowering the whole film at points. And whether or not it's a good score doesn't need to come into it at that point, because your score should be there to assist the film, not to distract from it. And I mean, Andy's right when he says, the fact that it just sort of layered upon layered, in those group fight scenes, you would have Wonder Woman's come in and you've got the Enya stuff going on with her. And then Cyborg comes in, you've got some kind of digital nonsense going on with him. And then Batman, but they're all playing on top of each other, and you just go, this is exhausting. And this is just the score. This isn't the film as a whole. It's just an exhausting score to listen to.
As far as the score goes, like Nick, who I run the channel with, he loves Junkie XL, and he loves this score. Me personally, I didn't notice it, but that's not because I think it accompanied the movie. I just didn't notice it. And that is, I suppose, is a damning statement in itself. Like,
I'd love to live in your world.
I didn't care for it at all, because it just didn't register with me. One of the things that I will say that I did notice, and it is a nod back to what I said about some things about the Justice League in 2017 is better. I like the fact that Danny Elfman incorporated the OG Batman theme tune into Batman's score, because you get a nostalgic hit when you hear it, when you hear the do 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 do, and you kind of go, ah, shit, it's Batman, yeah. But then it's it's changed a little bit, whereas they just completely scrap that, and I really like from nothing other than nostalgia. More than anything, I'm kind of like, yeah, I like that. But obviously, Danny Elfman's got the right to be able to do that, considering it was him that did the original score for the Batman movies.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't think it's like I said, I don't think it's worth talking about, because personally, I think it's just a non-entity.
Well, I suppose the couple of things to pick on is. The Wonder Woman score was very noticeable, that like every time she was on screen, like some kind of wailing, like you said, Enya choral choir just sang, and it was every time she appeared. And also the guitar riff that they played for every time Aquaman appeared, because he is rock and roll. But also simple things like, so in the original, Icky Thump by the White Stripes were used at the point where Aquaman is walking coolly towards the sea, and it's like, oh, look how cool he is walking towards the sea and drinking his alcohol. And this time it's Nick Cage,
Nicolas Cage.
Not Nick Cage, Nick Cave.
I have no idea. Like I said, I just didn't...
So it's... Or is it Leonard Cohen or someone like that?
Yeah,
like, it's replaced.
I think the problem is that it may well be, an issue of they got the rights for the actual release 2017 version, but then didn't bother getting the rights because Zack Snyder went, you know what, we'll go with Cohen here instead, or whatever. And I think there's, that is understandably then a case of that is his own personal vision for this, and it's his own personal, his own personal sort of artistic choice. So I can't get too hung up on that, even though I thought the original scene was fine and actually, I mean, suited the character within that film. I think, as we discussed on your live stream, the character feels like an entirely different one to any other appearance by him.
Yeah. And obviously, then you get things like the Icelandic crooning choir as well that are added in there as well. Desaad is a man who is...
I'm still really struggling with that.
Like, it's 5 minutes. Like, it's 5 whole minutes, and the film's 4 hours, and it doesn't need to be 4 hours. You can lose an hour and a half. To have 5 minutes of an Icelandic choir singing and then sniffing Aquaman's jumper makes no sense.
And apparently, the song is about something to do with people that are in love with a kind of like a hero of a town or something along those lines, and it's comparable to Aquaman coming and saving them and making sure that they're still living and stuff like that. But
I read another article about how it's actually an Icelandic version of that sea shanty that went viral on TikTok.
I wish that was true.
It's all about the Wellerman. Yeah, we'll ignore Desaad, we'll ignore Steppenwolf because we talked about villains. Okay, so the opening of the film started, and the biggest crime this film did was it removed the line, "Can we interview you for our podcast? Have you ever fought a hippo Superman?" We spent an entire 20 minutes talking about that on our original Justice League review, and they just whipped it away, and instead they've got Superman screaming, and these waves rippling through the world, once again, over what feels like it must be 10 minutes of just Superman screaming slowly, these waves rippling out. We've no longer got any racists kicking oranges. Like, was it for the best? Because I think it is.
I think what it is that Zack Snyder's got a tendency to put the end of the previous movie at the start of his latest movie. So he did it with BVS, with Man of Steel. If you remember, he just did it from a different perspective. And again, we've got the end of BVS in Justice League just from a different perspective and a little bit more emphasis on the scream. I've seen a video in the original in BVS. There are, you can see, if you look extremely fucking closely, might I add, there are ripples of like sound waves happening whilst he gets punctured.
Yeah.
So I think that was more to say, hey, look, that was my original view. And it's just to kind of highlight, this is my original thing that I always wanted to do, and look how different it was to what came out before, and that's probably why it feels like it goes on for much longer than it needed to. It's just kind of, and I think it's a lot of the additional footage, and I think we all spoke about this, and we felt this, that the original trailer that came out for this was just littered with just new material, and it just felt like, look, you see, I told you it was there, and I told you that this is what I wanted to do. This is starting very much feels like that is, look how different this is, literally from the start, and that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 100% a case of, this is different, and this is kind of my start. But also, I do feel that, like, someone went, Snyder, show, don't tell. And you went, okay, I'll show them it all. Everyone will feel Superman not being here anymore. This kind of links in nicely to the next bit of what you said there, which is, so they've titled it Banished Jokes, which I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about kind of how the writing has changed, how the tone of the film has changed. So I think you're absolutely correct in the sense that this is a film where they went, we can't have this seem like it was the film before. Like, we have changed it, and this isn't your Joss Whedon Justice League. And what that means is you have to you take away a lot of the lines that are deemed as humorous, because everyone went, that's a joke, so that must be a Joss Whedon line. And from my opinion, that comes at the detriment of this film, because this film then loses any aspect of fun. I think it's absolutely one of the driest movies I've seen in a long time, and it's definitely the driest 4-hour movie I've seen. It beats The Irishman for that. No, I think I had more jokes in, The Irishman than I did in this. But, and I do think that comes at the detriment for characters who are fun. They've tried to make Ezra Miller's Flash fun in different ways, and they just made him insufferable. And characters like Aquaman, who, yes, he's bro-dude Aquaman. We have seen the film Aquaman, and we all accepted that, and that's cool. That's now my Aquaman of just this kind of my man of redheads, don't you love him? That's the Aquaman I like now. And to have him this just be hey, yeah, I'm Aquaman. It's so dry.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about, I don't know who wants to go first. How do you feel about the kind of writing of this and how it actually changed things and the lack of jokes per se?
I feel like Snyder has a tendency to take himself too seriously, and he doesn't allow himself to potentially come off. He doesn't want to seem like he's coming off as a parody of anything. And I think that he was very, very, like you said, I think he was very, very conscious of trying to say that everything that was in the Whedon's version is not what I wanted. And even the scenes that were kept in Whedon's version that were Snyder are changed somewhat slightly. There are maybe different shots or different views, but you can tell it's the same thing. So I feel like he's just gone, whether it's him or whoever, it must be him, but whether he made that conscious decision of just saying that I really need to do that, and yes, at the detriment of certain characterizations that made the film somewhat comical, because he doesn't want to be stamped. I genuinely think it's because he takes himself too seriously far too often, because he likes, I don't know whether or not he likes to consider himself philosophical, but he likes to try and dip into very philosophical meanings and have more thematical meanings to things rather than just what they are, which is, you could argue in the Justice League that, you do get a lot of what you get just because that's what you get and just cause. But I don't feel like Snyder's into that, and that's why he takes a lot of that out. But the problem is doing that is you will naturally take out humour, because you can't really have meaning to things or a philosophical meaning to something whilst trying to inject humour. And yeah, you do notice it, and Aquaman is a perfect example of this. They gave Aquaman a character in the 2017 version, whether or not you like that character or not. You can't argue that he was his own character. Whereas this, he comes across a hell of a lot more serious. He still has some lines like "my man," but that's pretty much it. And he still does, say, ride a parademon through a building and then do the whole wavy hair thing. But that's about as...
If he hadn't, I would have rioted.
That's about as dude bro as he gets. Whereas they really went whole hog on him on the original.
But the interesting thing about that is, by having those moments still where he shouts "my man" and he surfs a parademon, that seems at odds with the Aquaman you're showing me for the rest of this film.
Yeah.
Alex?
So I think it all feeds into what we were saying earlier about he may have looked at this and said, right, okay, this could be my one shot at putting all my ideas out there. And if that's the case, then I will make this movie as close to the way I want it made as possible. And may have just looked at Chris Terrio's script from the original and gone, we need to lose everything that brought any light to it, because if I was gearing this myself, it would be towards the darker end of things. And, that original, Whedon isn't credited as director, but he is credited as a screenplay writer. And I think, aside from the fact that clearly in the Whedon original scenes, they're all going to be written by him, they're not going to be written by Terrio. Even in the Terrio written scenes, you kind of feel like there's at least some kind of life to it. And then here, I think the script really does take a downward turn when you do try and take out any of the stuff that adds some kind of, I don't know, some levels to it in terms of the approach you're taking. But I appreciate, again, it's hard because it's one of those things where if Snyder's trying to say to us, this is my original vision and this is the film as I would have wanted it made, then it gives him the liberty to then just cut out the stuff that he didn't like from the original script. And, he's worked with Terrio before, but I think it would be a case of he's looked at this and gone, well, in an ideal situation, if I wasn't being told by a studio, which I'm now no longer being told, they're essentially letting me make the movie I want to make. They've given me 4 hours to do, so, cool. Then this is the direction I want to take it in, and this is what would feed into, this is the tone of the film I would then want to make in Justice League 2 and Justice League 3. The issue you always come up against is whenever you've got a team-up movie that's being written or is being led by a different creative voice than the individual solo movies, you get this weird disconnect. And the problem is, especially when you haven't had those solo movies yet. So Aquaman came out post Justice League 2017, Cyborg never coming out, The Flash also probably never coming out. But because those are different creative voices, we saw in the Aquaman film that the direction that character took on his own felt like, even compared to the Justice League 2017 version, it felt like a much more dialed up version of that. And I've learned to appreciate that now in retrospect.
But at least it gave that it allowed that character to become that in its own right. Whereas you can't imagine this version of Aquaman then becoming that version of Aquaman, because that would it's just not.
It's too far of a jump.
Yeah,
because it doesn't share any DNA.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we spoke about, Alex, I know, is that like these characters no longer seem like 7 different characters. They become this kind of amorphous blob of just this one thing. I don't like the fact that this script takes away, let's not even talk just levity. Let's talk about just moments that I like in this that aren't in, that are in the old version that aren't in this. Stuff like the Flash being like, I'm not a hero, I've never saved anyone before, I've just pushed people and run away. And they took that kind of stuff out. But then Bruce being like, save one person, and him going, okay, and he saves one person and goes, okay, I need to save more. And it's a really nice moment because it's Flash kind of acknowledging where he is in his journey, and Bruce being that mentor and being like, there's more to superhero game than you realise. Stuff like Aquaman being like, we shouldn't bring Superman back because it's dangerous, and being a kind of dissenting voice. And then his heart kind of giving away the fact that he's scared. And little moments like that I just think like we lost those now because it had to be different. And don't get me wrong, there are some stuff in here that I think was terrible in the first version that aren't here. There's no more Flash falling on Wonder Woman's boobs. There's no more weird kind of janky stuff with Flash and Cyborg when they're grave digging. Yes, it's been replaced with new stuff, but we've lost stuff, and that's great. But let's talk then about so the next bit talks about is the finale. So one of the bad things about the finale is we lose the Russian family. What happened to them? Did they ever live there? I don't know. Did they die? I also don't know. Like, nobody tells me these things. But we get instead quite a rejigged final act. We get now them having a different plan to go in, and I think the plan probably makes more sense this time. We get to see the greatest sharpshooter in all of mankind in the paradigm that shoots Flash down. And then, we get the Flash. So you get this kind of video game Cyborg and Flash then having his turn back time moment.
Well, the second of his turn back time moments. Because he has the moment in the ship. And this is a big problem for me that I'd get into in the final summation anyway.
But do we prefer this finale? Because for me, I do. Mm-hmm. But what about you? Like, do you prefer this finale? Like, I realise there might not be overly much to say about it.
I feel like the characters have more to do that have a little bit more weight to it. When you look at what the Flash has to contribute in the finale of Whedon's version is that he is literally tasked with moving a family from A to B, and he sees Superman flying with a building, and they go, "Oh no chance, you're not going to beat me. That's too many people." That's literally all he contributes to the final act of the.
They needed saving, Anthony. They needed saving.
True. No, but like that's all he has to do. Whereas in this one, he literally saves the world. If his contribution isn't there, the planet is obliterated. You've then got Wonder Woman, and they've done an interesting thing with Wonder Woman in this one. If they made it very personal, and we spoke about this on the stream as well. But they made Steppenwolf go really kind of personal to her, so it felt a little bit more deserved when she took the final blow to him. Aquaman pretty much has the same kind of role. He's there just kind of adding a little bit more superhuman strength to it, and being a formidable opponent, somewhat of a formidable opponent to Steppenwolf. And Cyborg is, again, the same kind of thing, but just fleshed out a little bit more. Batman, again, still feel... I can't really... It annoys me and disappoints me about Batman, because he's so underpowered, it's unbelievable in these situations. So his contribution is no different, but the way that it all plays out feels a little bit more it feels like a from an A to Z, going through all the letters rather than going from A to J to P to Q to Z.
Yeah. But isn't that the great thing about Batman, like, especially like as somebody who's read the comics and stuff, is that he is pretty much the only human man who would be able to sit amongst these gods.
I'm not saying that it devalues him, but the film does a bad job of
having any reason for him to be there.
That's my annoyance, is the film doesn't allow Batman to do the kind of things that Batman would be expected to do. So he does all these cool things because, he's Batman, like you said, he's the only guy that can do it. But in this one, it's just like he's just there because he brought them together.
Because he's Batman.
He's Batman, and he's an old guy, and he's getting the shit kicked out of him by parademons. And the only thing that he's got are some gauntlets that can take on some energy. Like that's it.
Yeah. One thing I don't like about the finale is a similar thing that I didn't like when we watched Justice League before this, like the original version, and I hate the fact that there is never any real stakes. And I know I'm saying that about a film where at one point the Earth gets obliterated and Flash returns time, but at no point do I ever think these gods are in any danger of losing any kind of fist fight, because none of them break a sweat. But I do love the Flash stuff. Like, I think it looks really cool. And while I don't really understand how it works, because, he had to build up a certain amount of speed to make it work, and then all of a sudden, like, he could do that on the fly, it looks great. And I'll give it that. Like, if there's something I could give this film, it's like that moment looks great. Like, seeing him running and the Earth kind of reforming under his feet as he runs, it's visually really good. And the one thing Snyder is good at is visuals. Like, he knows how to make something look visually kind of interesting. Obviously not always, because we saw the nightmare scene and we know that looks like visually vomit. But
visual vomit. He
can do it. And I think that's interesting, at least. Did we like the kind of villain Zoom call at the end, where Darkseid and his cronies are staring through, and it's almost like two families meeting each other at Christmas over Zoom?
Well, can I just step in here and talk about this finale? Because I think you're right in terms of this final act is better constructed structurally than the 2017 version. That goes without saying. And I think you're right, and it doesn't feel like it's taking too many leaps of logic to get from, A to J or whatever. You do feel like you're working through it, and it's going through the gears, and you understand where you're going because you have this roadmap of like, oh, okay, this all makes sense. So I've not got an issue in terms of the structure of it all. Andy, the point that you're making about the stakes is, look, we all know that in comic books, no death is ever permanent, right? But the problem I have is when you introduce a character who can literally turn back time, nothing means anything anymore to me. because realistically, you have a character who has rewound time twice in this movie, which means that if someone does die, he can just rewind time and make sure that they don't die by doing things differently. And I appreciate Marvel will have a similar thing where they tried to explain it away by saying this is the only version of this story, and these things have to happen in order for us to win or whatever. But the problem with the Flash is you're given this information that, okay, he can turn back time, and he does it twice in this thing, and at no point do you ever feel like these characters are in any danger anyway. Even Batman, who, yes, is just a guy, but you never feel like he's out of breath. He still feels very much like a god. And my issue comes with the fact that if you're introducing me to a character who can turn back time instantaneously, then nothing means anything. And I don't have...
There has to be consequences.
I don't have any feeling of any kind of lasting damage to any of these characters now. You've already brought a character back from the dead in this movie. You've literally done that as a plot point, and you did it in 2017. But here we get to see the fact that, hey, Flash is apparently so far in his superhero journey that he has his own set of rules that he breaks twice in the film, and then in the second time he breaks them, he forgets that he broke them earlier.
Yeah.
Would you have preferred it if, at the end, like, if he returns back to normal time and the world's not destroyed, everyone just started vomiting and being like, oh god, I was dead for a second?
Or just like if Batman was still dead or something.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like they do try.
It makes it really hard for me to engage.
They try to make a point of saying that there are stakes for the Flash doing this. There is a consequence of doing it, but never at any point do they display what said consequences are.
Yeah.
And the reason that they're doing, or one can only assume that the reason that they're doing that is because the Flash movie is going to be all about that. But as someone that doesn't know the Flash movie and is watching it for just watching what it is, yeah, you kind of go, well, he could just do that infinitely. I get that. I totally get that. Yeah.
Next point on here is about Superman's reshoots and his black suit. We talked about this a lot on the live, so if you want to hear our fears there, I would just say that I still believe that Zack Snyder fundamentally does not get Superman and just wants Superman to be a bad guy, and I think once again shows it in this that all he wants to do is an injustice storyline.
I'm not here for round two of the argument between you and Ant of whether he does or doesn't fundamentally understand the character.
I couldn't disagree with you more.
Couldn't disagree with you more. It's a very funny moment.
The Flash Iris West scene is restored. So this is a scene where Flash... We get to see Flash do his Type 5 at the comedy club about a resume and then stroke a woman while grabbing a hot dog. Hated it. Hate the Flash. I think, was trying to scroll down the article and instead have just opened a picture of a topless Jason Momoa.
We all have our happy.
Interesting that
we all have our happy.
It's almost on that page.
We have our happy accidents. It's a happy accident. That scene. It's purely there, one, to introduce the character of Iris West, and two, to display some more ability. To kind of get a cheap joke in as well there about the hot dog and the dogs, which I didn't hate. I didn't hate that joke. I know that it is a corny joke. It is a very cheesy joke.
We could all disagree on certain
I didn't
things.
hate it, but I didn't. It didn't make me laugh. You kind of go, okay, yeah, cool.
My favourite thing is so before this came out, they showed a 30-second trailer for each character. Snyder put it out, and one of the things they showed was Flash kind of turning in his shoes, and his shoes kind of evaporate because of the speed he moves. And I saw somebody online being like, this shows that Snyder gets this character more than anyone else. And then later on in the film, he does something similar, and his shoes don't break. And Alex just turned to me and went, doesn't get him that much, does he?
He got him for a minute.
Well, you could argue that in BVS, like, you would expect his shoes to have evaporated in
That's the exact moment, yeah. Arthur Volko scene restored. We
Velcro.
Got some nice
Velcro
action.
Justice for Velcro.
Yeah, restore the Velcro verse.
There's way more Cyborg and Side of Stone, so we spoke a lot about this.
Yeah, so check out that live.
It's the biggest change
again,
in the movie, to be fair, isn't it? It is the single largest change is Cyborg.
And this thing, like, character-wise, we spoke a lot about, and I know we're saying a lot, we're skipping over saying go check out, but do go check out Talk and Review and that stuff. Here's something that is interesting that I that's linked to that, though, that I do like about this. So they talk about the Star Labs infiltration and all the extra stuff with Silas. So in the original cut, the mother box is just abandoned and nobody picks it up. In this, Silas picks it up, and the Justice League still ignore the fact that there's a mother box that they know they need to protect. But at least Silas is there. He picks it up and then goes and overheats it, because that's a way for them to be able to track where it is in the world. I much prefer that than them doing the whole, we need to find a place that is abandoned on Earth and there's a load of radiation and it's disappeared or something like that. It makes a lot more sense for me of how you find these mother boxes, and what that means. I mean, his dad could have just stepped out of the thing and pressed the button.
My theory in this one was, hey, Batman isn't here in this fight scene for ages. Maybe he's getting the mother box. Because even if Silas is getting it, the Justice League don't know that.
Just Batman with it under his arm, just jogging down the street.
Anything where it looks like a member of the Justice League is actually paying attention to the location of the mother box. Because I was like, oh, well, maybe that's where he is. But then he crops up and he still does his fight with Superman. And I'm like, oh, hang on.
Where have you been?
you've just been jogging to get here because the ship's all the way over there where you started out.
Exactly. Everyone else could get there really fast. So, Batman had to jog.
So that was a thing for me where it's just kind of
he might be rich, but he could invest in a pair of Heelys. That might make him go a bit quicker.
Could he not just like grab onto one of them and be like, give me a backy,
Hey, we proved at the end of this film when they climb onto the cooling tower. No, he has to do
Croggies
allowed. But at least there's a reason for them to be able to find these other boxes.
And like I say, that sort of the changes to the structure of the thing, they still make sense. Like that now makes more sense. But hey, it's a 4-hour movie. You're gonna have time to be able to flesh out these. But it's those things that were simple fixes. Realistically, where in the original, in Justice League, it was a big leap of logic of you going, this doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it really doesn't make any sense, and it's fixed a lot of that. But it better have done, because if they'd have ignored that, it's just kind of like, well, what's even the point in making this movie?
And also, how's Snyder going to get in a body evaporating to some kind of science? You can't just have
science. You
can't just have it in Watchmen. You have to have it in this. You get the opportunity. You take that obliterating body.
Like he's worked out how to do the obliteration effect, and he's like, I'm going to use it now.
We all remember when Ving Rhames was obliterated in Dawn of the Dead.
We all remember Gerard Butler in 300 being obliterated by a shield.
Everyone in Sucker Punch should have been obliterated.
The next one is a whole new character of Ryan Choi, who is the Atom, being quite in this quite a lot. Lois Lane finding her way because she goes to finding herself there. It's not because she's the big gun that Batman's got, but because she's been going to visit Superman.
Again, that makes more sense. That makes more sense logically than just, hey, Batman's gone and recruited the big gun and left us sort of, oh, who is this mysterious big gun? But yeah, I mean, it makes more sense this way. So I don't disagree that stuff now works in a way that it didn't in the original.
Do you reckon that's what what Lois Lane nicknamed Batman's Dingaling?
It's a family podcast, Dan. Come on. I mean, it's not. But
the next scene is, I know something that Alex, I know you will want to talk about this, because I know it's something that you found really infuriating about this. So the next one is literally called Martha Gets Martianed. So firstly, I'll point out that Martian Manhunter
Please tell
like
me that that's the actual name of this script.
Like, Martian Manhunter looks like one of the worst characters I've ever seen put to screen. Like, it is...
It looks like a PlayStation 2
He actually looked very, very similar to the CW Martian Manhunter in Supergirl.
Like, I laughed so hard that I missed
we rewound
what happened.
The scene.
We had to go back because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But Alex, do you want to talk about your theory about your feelings towards the scene of the fact that this is Martian Manhunter talking to
this is a really frustrating scene, because I actually think that the conversation between Martha and Lois is one of the better written scenes in the movie. That conversation they have at the table is, I think, the best written scene. But the problem I've got with it is it's all this stuff about how, trying to sort of establish that this relationship between the two of them still exists even past Clark's death. And then you undercut all of that by revealing it's Martian Manhunter having this conversation with her rather than Martha. Because all you're saying is, well, realistically speaking, we've got absolutely zero evidence that Martha has even spoken to Lois since Clark's death, because this picks up immediately after his death, and we've never seen her actually have that conversation with her. So Martha doesn't care about Lois and never did, is what I'm getting from this. The first time they actually meet after Clark's death is at the farm.
When he's back alive.
Yeah, when clearly, and it answers the question of how did Martha manage to travel from Metropolis, which is on the East Coast, to the heart of Kansas within an hour. It's because she's been living in Kansas the whole time. She doesn't live at a place by the diner or anything. She's never gone and spoken to her. So it's great having that scene, but then having that reveal is stupid as all hell because A, Martian Manhunter clearly doesn't have a stake in this planet, and I appreciate that the end scene, it was supposed to be Green Lantern rather than Martian Manhunter, and they wrote it ambiguously. But it means that you've wasted the reveal of Martian Manhunter because you've undermined the best written scene in the movie, and it means that he doesn't have a stake in this world because otherwise he would have at least joined in some way. The fact of the matter is, she was still going and getting those coffees. It wasn't a case of she was stopping doing that.
Yeah.
So it's not like Martian Manhunter was the reason that she got the coffee on that particular day.
That's what I was confused about, because I understood that scene as that Martian Manhunter knew that that's what Lois was doing and realised that she'd stopped doing that, so he kind of gave her a prod to redo it. But there was no... Then I thought about it and I said, well, actually, she was doing it all along. It was just the fact
didn't get any indication that she'd stopped.
It was just me thinking that must be the reason, because why else would you kind of convince someone to go back to work? Because you work at a paper, like you that's not gonna change the outcome of this movie. Then I thought, well, if that's the only reason, it must be because she stopped doing it, because she stopped going to work. Like, we only see her do that at the start, if I'm remembering correctly. We only see her go and visit the statue at the start of the movie. So my logic was that between then and them having that conversation, that she'd then taken a leave of absence or something like that, and he convinced her. But it's me clutching at straws and trying to put a reason behind it. And for a movie that is touted to kind of explain a lot more, it kind of throws in a bit of confusion there. But it's because, like you said, originally the whole idea was Lantern was supposed to be at the end of Martian Manhunter, and maybe not even kind of originally kind of in it at all. So yeah, that one I didn't care, I think, is the main thing for me. Like, I didn't really care because he didn't do anything before. Had the ability, he was Swanwick the entire time, so he had the ability to be able to do something even back in Man of Steel days when Zod was a big threat. You would kind of think someone that's got the powers of the Martian Manhunter might want to step in at any point during this, and didn't. So I just didn't really care for that reveal, and it felt like it was... It felt like it meant more to Snyder than it did to anyone else, just to get that included in, because it wasn't a big reveal. It was like, okay, cool, so.
And it's one of those things that he's talked about a lot since like it didn't happen. Like, he talked a lot in kind of teaser things of being like, oh no, Martian Manhunter's been here all along, it's General whatever his face is. But yeah, I completely agree with Alex. Like, I think it really ruins a moment that could have been nice by them being like, this isn't actually the person, like, it wasn't Martha having this conversation, it was Martian Manhunter. And I know for Alex, like, the worst part about all of this is the diner might not even exist.
We don't even know that the diner that she's moved close to even is real.
And
he might have made that
up. It's just
up.
An injustice. It's just it is.
It is.
That's the real injustice.
Yeah, it truly is. Anything else major to sort of cover here, Andy? Because I'm just wary of time, and I think,
our rating is probably the next big thing, and I think it looks like there's the R rating because the post-credit scene doesn't matter anymore because we kind of covered that. Although having whether Flash could beat Superman in a race, we all loved that, guys. We all loved that.
It was a good scene.
But yeah, the R rating.
Fun.
So
brunch, good.
There's more blood in this. Batman says he'll fucking kill the Joker.
There was some F-bombs.
Cyborg says
there
fuck
was
the
some
world.
F-bombs that argue that you don't really need.
Yeah, and there was some pretty ropey CGI blood. And I think this is the problem, is that if you're putting an R rating on for the sake of, number one, because it's Zack Snyder and he loves just, he'll put a fake blood stain in somewhere where it doesn't need to be just because he's like, hey, look at that, edgy. But that kind of is the worst of Snyder, where I feel like he's trying to, I don't know, it's almost like he's like playing a character of edgy director man, and sees himself as a sort of, I think he sees himself as a contemporary of Tarantino's in a way. But I mean, Tarantino's use of blood and guts and swearing has become very tiresome in the latter half of his career, and Zack Snyder's never really been able to pull it off with anything like the finesse that he originally did back in the early days of Tarantino. So with this, it kind of felt like it's got an R rating, but you can lose all of that stuff, and it doesn't impact the actual film at all. And so you look at something like Logan, for instance. The violence is exactly the point of the film. And I'll bang on about Logan as many times as I need to get people to watch it. And if they haven't, they should. And, there is a film where in a superhero movie, death is permanent. Because that's the point. Is that it's that whole thing of there's no living with the killing. And you have to understand that character's motivation for the things that he goes through in that film. And the R rating there was earned because it at least demonstrated the sheer brutality of a lot of what was going on and the fact that he couldn't live with that anymore. Here, it is just a case of, I want Wonder Woman to throw someone at the wall and snap their neck and leave a bloodstain behind. Wow. Okay.
One of the bloodstains I really didn't understand is the additional scene with Steppenwolf with the Atlanteans. He throws an Atlantean against what would seem like a flat rock, no jagged edges on it, and there is a bloodstain behind it that seemingly was at the back of his armor. It's not his head; it's the back of his armor. It's
on his back, isn't it?
It's his armor that stays intact against a flat rock. Like, how does blood get
mesh
there?
armor?
How does blood happen to do that? Like, it's just some...
It's Atlantean blood. We don't know how it works. It's water based. Yeah, like every blood.
The R rating in this was absolutely 100% unnecessary to the creation of it.
It's just one of those things where you hear the thing said and you go, well, this is going to be an R for the sake of being an R. And hey, it was.
Fuck the world, right?
Oh, fucking hell.
Fuck the world. But yeah, that's the list of, apparently that's all the changes. There's probably more, but most of the changes. So, shall we start doing some wrap-up?
Yeah, I think we should wrap up.
I know you have threatened to wrap up some thoughts all the way through the episode, Alex. So
we ended.
We start with
we ended up kind of touching on a lot of the stuff that I would have anyway, in terms of the lack of any kind of real consequence to any of the action, the lack of any distinct voices within the key protagonists, and we've talked about that on the live stream, and again we'll plug that at the end. But I mean, overall, structurally, it is an improvement. And it damn sure better have been, because if you'd have managed to make any less sense in terms of the plotting, I would have been astounded. So in terms of the wins for me, it is very much a film that wins in terms of, okay, it's made the plot, which at the best of times is, relatively flimsy. It's a fairly standard superhero plot, but it makes sense now in a way that it didn't in 2017. And you're having to make less leaps of logic, which is great. Additionally, it is a win for the fans. And that includes Snyder. Snyder is clearly a fan of these properties and is a fan of the way in which he's handling the properties. And whether or not you agree with the way he's handling them, he is the person who had that responsibility. And the fact of the matter is, he's made a movie that is long enough that I can honestly believe that this is his true vision for it. Because one thing we know about Snyder is if you give him a director's cut, he will add as much as he can, right? So, from my point of view, I think I'm coming at it from a completely different angle to the majority of the fan base. I'm coming at it from, and I know you said earlier, and it's not ignorance or anything like that, but there's a degree of me who's just, I am someone who's not ingrained within that comic book world in the same way that a lot of people are, particularly the ones who were tweeting restore the Snyderverse or release the Snyder cut. And when I'm on a Zoom call with you guys or whatever this is, I'm looking at you and going, you are the people, particularly you, Anne, you are the person that this is made for way more than I ever was. So if I'm to look at this and say, okay, I personally get nothing out of this and I think it's pretty awful just because of everything about it, I've got to also look at it from the perspective of, from your point of view, it achieved something that the first one didn't do, and it realizes a vision of these characters that clearly has been the vision for them the whole way through. Because we've seen these interpretations of Batman and Superman are still close enough to the ones in Batman versus Superman that I believe that they're the same characters. Aquaman is a different thing because it kind of feels like he had no involvement in actually making Aquaman. So when that comes around, I'm kind of like, whatever. But yeah, with this, it kind of feels like there's got to be two ways to look at it. And one of them is from my perspective of just, for me, I don't understand what this is for. But then I look at this and I think, right, well, it clearly has worked in a way that the 2017 version didn't for you. And for fans, that has got to be a good thing. So I'll never say that, if people said to me, hey, your favourite directors get director's cuts of all their movies, I mean, it tends to be that they make the film they want to make anyway because no one's going to see it, so it doesn't matter that it's not 2 hours long or, But, yeah, from my perspective, I think there's two ways to look at it, and I think it's important to have that perspective. Because I think I was damning on it, and I am still damning on it, because I think as a film, I don't think it works in the ways that it needs to be worthwhile. But as a piece of fan service more than anything else, look at you, it's hit the spot. And it's not your favourite DC movie, but it's in the top half. So, from going from Justice League to this, I can understand its place within the universe of fandom. Sorry, that was a really wanky section.
And do you have anything to add to that, or do you have anything you want to kind of round up?
Yeah, coming from my perspective, I am glad I got a movie that is a lot more character driven and it makes more sense than what we got before, because it really annoyed me from what we got before. So it gives me the chance to explore these characters that I've known and loved for a very long time. And like you said, it is made for a particular type of audience. You could very strongly argue that does not make logical or business sense when you are making a movie, because it doesn't. Because you should be making it to appeal to the masses. That's what makes money. But Snyder, my overall issue with, I love the fact that I've got this movie. I feel like I hate the fact that it's Snyder that is involved in it, because he gets so much attention. And I feel like he believes in his own source that much that it becomes a sense of arrogance, and it annoys me that I love something so much by a director that I kind of starting to dislike more and more. So it annoys me that there could be, I mean, it's very unlikely, there could be a potential for Justice League 2 and 3, which I would get very excited about, but it annoys me the fact that Snyder's going to be doing it, because I know it's going to fall into the Snyder pitfalls, which some people love, some people hate, but I'm disliking the guy more and more the more I kind of am exposed to interviews, his opinions, the way that he does things. But yeah, my annoyance is I like the output, so I just don't. Yeah, I'm frustrated with him. But overall, I am happy that I've got the movie that I feel like I wanted.
Yeah.
Mm. And I realise that obviously it's hard for you, and you kind of touched on this on the live, which is when you break something down to its component parts, it's hard to always sound so positive about something you really liked, because you're breaking something down that can then be seen as, oh, how could you be so positive if you're kind of nitpicking on this stuff? But, you know, it's still a thing that you still enjoyed it. I think it's great to see that you've grown, Alex, as well.
It's critiquing movies, though, really, isn't it? That's the whole point. Like you can be a fan of something, but you can give it a critique. It's not about bashing it. It's about, you know, just like you say, critiquing movies. That's all that is.
Yeah, and from my, just to sort of piggyback off that and just finish up in terms of what I was going to say, is that, you know, it does feel like you have to look at it in the context in which it was provided to you. These are exceptional circumstances, the likes of which probably won't ever be repeated, and, you know, the likelihood is there won't be a 2 or a 3 in this series, but there is a 1, and that's kind of come about from a very specific set of circumstances all configuring to be, and I think potentially without the pandemic this maybe doesn't happen. But what I think is interesting is that I think, you know, you look at it from a comic book movie fan's perspective, and that's entirely the wrong perspective still. It has to be from a perspective of a fan of what this universe has been set up as in the initial run of those films. And I think it's a completely different question to someone like you, Andy, who has a love for these characters within their original context. And each adaptation of them is always going to be different. And The Batman in 2022 is going to be entirely different to the representation we get here. I'm guaranteeing that. But also it's going to be 100% different to the version we got in Nolan's films, the version we got in Schumacher's films, the version we got in Burton's films. So everything stands within its own context. And I think that goes doubly so for this film, in that this is a film that is born out of a fervent need for the clarity on what actually was supposed to happen here. Yeah. But it's just because I don't want to feel like I'm ragging on it too much and saying it doesn't achieve what it sets out to do, because I think it probably does achieve what it sets out to do for the people it set it out to do for.
Yeah, because my point back to you would have been the fact that, you know, I am a comic book fan. I love these characters. Superman, for example, is my... Sure. You know, he's one of my top favourite characters in comic books. But I think this film is terrible, and I hate this universe. And I think no matter how much you do to it over 4 hours, you're still not going to win me round, because I don't think you get... Like, okay, you get it for the people that you get it for, but I also feel that there are times when you just do not get it. And maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I just don't get what they're doing, and maybe I don't get that version of it, and that's fine, I guess. You're not supposed to like everything, but unfortunately, like,
but this is all.
I'm not trying to start. I'm not trying to start an argument or anything here. I'm just trying to make a point here of, and it's not necessarily a point I agree with either. Well, it's a point I agree with, but it's, you know, whether you're a fan of the original source material, you're a fan of the character in the way he is to you. But Zack Snyder's reading of Superman may be entirely different. He may get something out of Superman that you don't get at all. And he may see something that you don't see at all, or you think is dead against everything.
I think that's clear. I think that's very, very clear.
But likewise, he might not see the things that you're seeing, or that he might see those things, but he might think they're actually the less important aspects, and here's the stuff I want to highlight because it's not as well explored. 100%. And fandom is ultimately about people sharing their ideas on things and telling each other why they're wrong.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think there's a whole conversation to be going into about kind of about that exact point you've made there, and I think there's a whole, maybe even a whole podcast in it. I do think there are fundamentals to characters, and there are certain things that make those characters who they are that are just ignored. And especially in Snyder's versions, he doesn't follow the fundamentals of the characters, and these are his versions. And I maybe don't like those. But then again, Man of Steel is my favourite one of these DC movies. because it kind of gets it right.
It's the only movie that Snyder's made with Superman in it where he feels kind of hopeful.
And for me, I think the problem is it's the hope that gets you. Like, I hoped for something better, and I didn't get that. But I'm glad you did, Ant. It's great that some people did really enjoy this. Restore the Snyderverse. Let's do it, guys. We're on that bandwagon. We're joining the hashtag army 4 times a day.
I'll be printing t-shirts, guys. Don't worry about it. Don't worry.
I'm getting the t-shirt that says, "We released the Snyder Cut." That's official DC merchandise.
And thanks for joining us on this, because it was important to us to try and at least get someone on who felt like they were the voice of reason within a slight echo chamber here in terms of our thoughts on it. But thanks for joining us, because it has been I think it's been a good discussion, and one where, I've not necessarily come out of it feeling any more positive about my experience, but maybe about the experience that certain people are having with that film. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the important thing to take away. But thank you for joining us. Is there anything you would like to plug at this time?
No, I mean, no more so than what's already happened throughout the entire podcast. So I appreciate that. So yeah,
some people keep their plug section to the end. We sort of litter it in throughout as... It's subliminal messaging.
Yeah,
really.
So talk and review.
We'll see if we can get a link to the actual video and put it in the description of the podcast.
If there is a link, if there is a plug to it, it would be go and watch that, because we do dive into each character a lot more. And like you said, it's like 3 hours long, so it's a good deep dive into the characters. So that's talk and review on YouTube. Talk and review. That's how I'll plug that.
Great stuff, thanks.
So I will plug IGN for giving me the great breakdown of what has changed. Thank you, IGN.
Is it probably a legal responsibility to say we aren't sponsored by IGN for this?
They know
they can sponsor me if they want to. They could pay me for talking.
If we were sponsored, we'd have not brought up a half-naked picture of Aquaman midway through the podcast.
Hey, they did that to me.
But yeah, I mean,
if you want to,
I'll wrap it up. As always, you can find us on anywhere you get your podcasts. We're on Twitter at Dinosaur Man 15. We have a YouTube channel which is Dinosaur Man Podcast, I think. Yes. And a Twitch channel which is at Dinosaur Man Pod.
Yeah.
So twitch.tv/dinosaurman.pod. No, not .pod, just regular pod.
No, just Dinosaur Man Pod.
Idiot for thinking that. As always, John Neves did the theme song, and Andy, you've been... first of all, thanks, Ant, for coming on. You feel like you're sort of semi-regular at the moment, but that's because we've got a lot of stuff that we can talk about with you.
Thank you.
And we like having you here.
Thank you.
Andy, thanks for hosting and guiding this conversation.
Alex, thank you for also being the host. Until next time, guys, if Martian Mantle comes to your door, try and act a little bit surprised.
Bye.
Bye.